My name's Hunter. I'm an alcoholic addict from Dayton, Ohio. Um, Born March 7th, 1988. I grew up around Montgomery County here in Ohio. Grew up in Huber Heights. Normal childhood. You know, parents both worked all the time, but they tried to provide for us to give us a better life than they had. And I didn't want for much as a child, but you know, going through life, there was always something missing, and it took many years for me to realize that I was missing, an emotional connection with my parents. Um, they worked a lot. My dad worked out of town a lot. Mom worked a lot. So I was taking care of my little sister since, I was young, since elementary school. And, I didn't realize how much toll that took on me, emotionally until I got older, Once I started hitting middle school, I was so stressed out that I was longing for, connectivity with somebody. I was always different. I always wanted to show out because I didn't get that attention at home. So, I always did that look at me, just to get attention from wherever I could get it. Um, Now, I remember I was good in school, all the way through high school, grade wise. But towards the end of middle school, I started meeting some friends, that were living outside the norm, drinking a little bit here and there, smoking a little weed here and there. And I was like, you know what? I want to try that because they looked like they were always having fun. And like I said, I was looking for attention wherever I could get in to fit in. Um, so I remember the first time I ever drank and used drugs, marijuana, I was, in seventh grade, young. And, at that moment, I remembered I had an instant, lift of happiness, because I was like, ooh, I like this. And it makes me feel like the person I feel on the inside. And, the people liked me more and more. So, I did it for a little bit through middle school, and it didn't really take off until, my freshman year of high school. I broke my back playing football and was put on heavy painkillers. Um, and it went on for a long time. By the time I got to my junior year of high school, I was addicted to opiates. And, it doesn't matter, what, you know, what part of life you came up in, whether you have nothing or have something, everybody is, impacted by this disease. Like I said, my family did everything. I mean, we had four-wheelers, campers, pool, everything. So, just because I was middle class doesn't mean I wasn't, subjected to, being addicted to drugs. And I think a lot of people I know have been introduced to drugs, either due to, injuries, pain-wise, or stuff like that. Now, I remember I ended up getting off them, for a while. But I was to the point where I was smoking and drinking so much because people I was hanging out with were doing that and partying, and I was fitting in, and I was craving that my whole life. So, it got to the point by the time I was 16 years old, I was, I felt like I was grown and I could live on my own. I didn't need my parents to tell me what I can and can't do. Um, Unfortunately, they told me what I can and can't do, and they shipped me down to Florida with my grandmother. So, that right there, I formed a big resentment against my parents, for sending me away. If you loved me, why would you send me away, 1,600 miles away? And, I held on to that resentment for a long time. Um, I've also dealt with, other stuff in my life. You know, my dad never gave me emotional attention ever as a child. My dad didn't tell me he loved me the first time until I was 24 years old. And, finding out later in life, I found out the reason why is because he was in a Big Brother mentor program as a child, and he was raped by his big brother. So he was emotionally shut off from that point on. And he didn't know how to show me emotion because, well, his dad was not around. So, I went through all these years thinking, well, my dad don't even love me anyways. And, holding on to that thought in the back of my head, I put a lot of, psychological trauma on me. So, I moved down to Florida, And I had a little construction sense from working with my uncle, younger ages. And I helped my grandma rebuild her house. Well, we lived out in the middle of the country in Florida, 5 acres, nothing but land. And there was one kid next door, all he did was drink and smoke weed. And I'm like, oh, well, out of all these places, I found my new best friend. And, as time went on, just hanging out with him, well, he introduced me to other people, which eventually led me down a way deeper route. I got introduced to cocaine. And, once I started that, it was kind of all downhill from there because I was like, oh, well, now I could drink even more while I'm doing this. People I've dealt with the substance, know what I'm talking about. So, time goes on. I didn't finish school because I moved down to Florida at the end of my junior year, and I was only 2 credits away. So I'm like, I'm not going to start a new school my senior year. I'm going to just get my GED, go to take stuff on my own time, so it gives me time to party and drink all I want. I was a full-blown alcoholic before I was even legally old enough to drink. Having withdrawals, having the shakes, it was not good. As time went on, my grandmother ended up getting sick, and she was in hospice for almost a year, so I was left in a house by myself. Well, you leave a kid that just drinks and parties all the time in a house by himself. Well, he's going to invite other people to drink and party in his house all the time with him because he don't want to be alone. And I already deal with, separation anxiety as it is, wanting people to be around and wanting to be liked. So, things progress. I ended up going to, college and getting, an auto body and paint refinishing degree. Finished that all while, I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And I don't remember a lot of it. And, looking back at life now, like, I wish I remembered because, there was good memories I remember, and there's a lot I don't remember. But, it's just, this disease, it takes what it wants from you and leaves the rest. So, things went on, and, as my group of friends progressed to different groups, other drugs were introduced to me. I ended up back on painkillers, and, that took a lot out of me. And I always was the type of person that said, I'm never going to put a needle in my body. Well, I lied. And that was the worst drug I ever used. Because I consider the needle a drug. After that point, my life just spiraled out of control. I didn't care what was going on, what I was doing. If it could go through a needle, it was going in my body. I noticed at that point in my life, things started just evaporating out of my life. My whole life was run by that little piece of metal and plastic. To be honest, on my way to work, I would have to stop, find a little spot to pull over and do this, or, while I'm at work, find a little spot. And, looking back at it now, like, I could have been to jail so many times as the amount of times cops have rode by me. And, I've been blessed by God, to not been to jail. But, at that point, like, I had a fiance, right? And she wasn't even supposed to be able to get pregnant. And she got pregnant. Don't have any children. This was going to be my first child. And I was kind of excited. Even though my life was in total chaos, because I was stuck on painkillers, I was still excited because, this is what I've always wanted in my life. And, time was going on, and, I was starting to get attached, rubbing, feeling the baby and everything. Well, the doctors decided they're going to try to take out her birth control implant because they didn't want it to affect the baby. Well, that day was probably one of the hardest days of my life, because they caused her to have a miscarriage. And that just, my life was already spiraling out of control. Well, at that point, my life was out of control. I didn't want to feel anymore. I didn't want to talk anymore. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to be left alone, go to work with my buddy who I was using drugs with at work, and just get high all day. And it got to the point where I was stealing from the company. They trusted me with a bank card to the account, and I was skimming money out of the account to feed my habit. Um, and at this point, she's using also. So we got two addicts living in the same house, and we're both in a complete wreck. Um, it got to the point where we lost everything. Living in Florida, the power got turned off. It's August in Florida with no air conditioning. Um, if you've ever been there, 100 degrees, no air is not nice. Um, and it got to that point, like, it was the first time I said, I've been beaten. Um, I've already lost two houses, TVs. I mean, I've given it all away to drugs, multiple times. This is the first time I said I was defeated. This was in 2014. And, called my mom, after all these years, 8 years of being in Florida, saying, having very minimal contact once a year, maybe on Christmas or Thanksgiving, just because I was hurt by them sending me away. And, all this time, I called him back, and my mom was like, okay, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to come home. I didn't tell them the kicker was she was coming with me. But they were like, okay, well, we'll get you up here, and we'll figure out a place to stay. So I sold the rest of everything I had, speakers out of my car, because those were the only thing I kept onto my whole addiction, because those were my pride and joy. And I packed up in 2 nights and left and came to Ohio. And during this time, I am on almost every drug you can think of. I mean, painkillers, meth, cocaine. I'm just whatever I could get drinking. I was doing it because I was never dealing with the psychological trauma of her losing the child. And it hurt. It broke me. So it got to the point I moved back up to Ohio, and my sister had a friend that could help me get into a spot with one of her friends, and I'm like, okay, cool. Things are gonna work out. Life's gonna be different. At the time I thought a geographical change would cure me wanting to get high, which was the biggest lie in my head. So I got here, and I always held on to reservations of wanting to do heroin, because I was on painkillers, and I had people telling me it's the best, and I'm like, okay, well, I got reservations, and I was like, but I don't know. I haven't been to Ohio in almost 10 years. I don't even know where to even start finding it. Well, it came to me. First day I was here, and got to the point I almost overdosed because I didn't know what I was doing, and being an addict, I loved it. It's the sick part of it. I loved it. I almost died. I loved the rush of almost dying. So, things start progressing. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I can do this recreationally, in portions. And, I maintained that for a while, about a month and a half. Just do it once on the weekend and just go. I was like, okay, I'll just spend $30. No harm, no foul. Nowadays, $30 is like, I mean, it kills people. I mean, for real. And, like I said, I did that for about a month and a half. Well, after about a month and a half, you got 2 addicts in the same house doing that. Well, one of them's going to convince the other one, let's do it twice a week now. Well, twice a week turns into every other day, which therefore now I'm addicted and withdrawing and every day. So the cycle's back on. I am selling everything out of my house, Christmas presents, speakers out of my car, TVs, not paying the rent, and just like, if I'm not paying the rent, I'll probably get a couple months out of here, and then I'll figure it out from there. Because that was my biggest motto. We'll figure it out. Never had a plan any of the time. I always figured somebody would bail me out. So, time goes on, and I remember one of the scariest moments of my life was I was living in an apartment, and I overdosed. This was before Narcan. This was before anybody knew what happened. They thought if you died, well, you were dead. And I was during the time. I remember I did something I've never done before, and being an addict, I was like, I've handled worse. I could just do this much. Well, apparently that was a lie. And it almost killed me. I remember, actually, I don't remember anything. I remember waking up and my face had blood dripping down it and my shirt was ripped and soaked because my ex-fiance, she tried to beat me back to life. She tried to drag me to the shower. She couldn't get me because I was too heavy, so she brought cold ice water and threw it on me and tried to beat me with a hairbrush to wake me back up. I remember during this time she thought I was dead. I mean, so she was about to commit suicide. And I remember when I took a gasp of air and came back to life, I remember hearing her hit the ground and dropping a needle. She was literally tied off, about to kill herself. And I came back to life. If that's not something greater than myself, then I don't know what is. And at this moment, like, we've realized that we need to do something different. Going on like this, one of us is really going to die this time and not come back. Because she dealt with a lot of overdoses, and that's how she knew how to put him in the cold shower, because I did it to her a lot. And so we decided, you know what, let's try to get off. So we tried to do this whole Suboxone thing, and anybody who knows anything about Suboxone is if you're not deep enough in withdrawal, you're not going to like it, because precipitated withdrawals are not fun. And we both found out about that first day because we didn't know anything about Suboxones. And at that point, we're like, you know what, I'm not going through this again, and we didn't give it a chance to quit. So, a couple more years go on. She gets a scholarship to go to Wright State for college because she wanted to be a social worker. She wanted to get off everything, and at the time we did get off everything for a little bit. It was only a couple months, but enough time to her to want to change her life plan. I was working in construction at the time, so I was just going and going and going. Drinking every day, smoking weed. And it all it took was, us living out Wright State the first time I lived there, for her to have a brilliant idea, let's go out and get some heroin. And, me, long day of work, I was like, you know what, why not? And yet again, the cycle started again. And this time it didn't go, recreationally. This was every day again, because they say progression. It gets worse every time, which is true. Now, we ended up having to move out because she lost her financial aid, so we ended up moving out, and things did not get any easier after that point. Went from living in places where people were yelling at their kids and hitting their kids to living in garages in the summer in Ohio. I mean, and we thought everything was okay because we had a bed out there and we had a big screen TV and Netflix. We're like, hey, it's not that bad. It's just hot. We didn't look past the part where we were pissing in buckets and shitting in buckets. But we kept telling ourselves things are going to work out. We're going to make it through it. Things eventually got to the point where nothing ever worked out. My family started finding my paraphernalia, finding my needles, finding my spoons, and at that point I couldn't deny it no more. And the first time I went to treatment was in 2016, and that was because my parents found, my mom and my grandma found my drug stuff, and I was like, well, you know what, this will get them off my back if I go to treatment. I didn't know anything about treatment, never had the desire to go, never thought I needed it. I thought I was just a 20-year-old kid, just having partying and having a good time like all 20-year-olds do. Not realizing there was something different about me than most kids that could do that normally. So I ended up going to treatment in 2016. Stayed for a long time, like 5 months. And got out of there, and I was going to treatment to appease my family, to make them happy. I had no desire to quit using drugs or drinking. I really didn't. I think I might have told myself I did, but I held on to reservations tighter than anybody could. And I ended up coming to sober living, to Good Shepherd Ministries, and I started working real early. About the first 3 weeks I was here, I started working. Started getting that money flow back in, and I was going to school at the time. Well, I wasn't working no kind of program, and for me, I needed to work on what was inside here. Everything that was keeping me sick was in here, and I never want to let go of any of that, because I was in denial. So, after going to school and working and living a sober living, I got my, refund check. I was like, you know what? I don't have to answer to nobody anymore. I'm going to rush out of here, go get my own place, can have people over, can do what I want. It was a very impulsive decision, but it didn't end up working out at all. I ended up keeping the apartment the whole time of the lease, but within a year I was using again, because I wasn't working no program, I had nobody to talk to, period, except for people at work that were drinking and using. So obviously it was bound set up for me to have a relapse, and I did. And like I said, progression, it gets worse. This time I didn't have no let's do it once or twice. I was like, you know what, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go out. And I tried and tried and tried, and it got to the point where I worked around the corner at a body shop during classic restorations, and it was literally a block away from my house. So I would show up when I wanted, because I wouldn't go to work until I was able to be, not sick, and leave 2 hours later to go get more. Well, that eventually, took me to deeper roads. And like I mentioned earlier, anything I could put through a needle in my body, I did. And that ended up causing me to almost die. I was feeling real sick one day, and I couldn't breathe, and I ended up calling my mom and said, Mom, I don't feel good. Well, my mom came and picked me up, and she's like, Hunter, your skin's gray. I'm like, what do you mean my skin's gray? Normally I'm used to saying white because I'm either sick or, too high. She's like, no, it's gray. And so we went to the hospital. Come to find out, I had endocarditis. If you don't know what that is, it's a heart infection that was shooting infection into my left lung. My blood was sepsis. Doctors told me I was 4 to 6 hours away from death. And, at that point, I had the worst mentality any addict could ever have. I can't die. Because other than the one time, I've never overdosed. I've never died from anything. So I thought I was invincible. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital on antibiotics. And, it was crazy. They sent me home with a IV in my arm. And, I'm an addict. You send me home with an IV in my arm, I'm putting drugs into it. And I'm looking back at it now, it's so stupid. I ended up with blood clots. My circulation in my body's so bad from, killing my veins. 32 years old, and, my veins are shot. And do I wish I could have done it sooner in life? Yeah. Do I wish I would have acknowledged that I was an actual drug addict sooner in life? Most definitely. Now, do I believe everything works out in the time it's supposed to work out? Yeah. So, as of right now, it sits. I went back to rehab back in April 8th of 2019. Stayed for 2 months, got out June 10th. Came back to the same Sober Living, Good Shepherd Ministries. And, this time I was like, I'm going to do it different. You know what? I'm gonna stick it out. I'm not gonna rush out of here. I'm gonna, work a program, and I'm gonna deal with what's in here. And, now it helps me out because I'm able to deal with situations a lot differently. I don't act on impulse as much. Yeah, I'm not perfect, but I do things differently. I don't snap on people when I don't like what they say. Because I'm able to work a program today, and I work through all that stuff that's been keeping me sick in here. All the stuff with my dad. That stuff with my dad, I didn't find that out till I was 27 years old. All these years, I'm like, he doesn't even love me. And then my mom told me, that's why. It's not he don't love you, it's that. And then that was a big relief. But it was too late. I was already too far gone. So, this past April, April 8th, I just celebrated 1 year. And it's actually a week longer than the last time I got sober. Because I was not working a program last time, and after a year and a week, I was high again. Because I thought I didn't need to do anything. And I didn't. So, like I said, this time I'm doing things differently, And, I'm able to work with other people today, when they struggle. If they need to talk, I'm there for them. If I need to give people advice of stuff I've been through and how I dealt with it, I do. So, like I said, just me doing things differently helps me and helps others at the end of the day. And I'm just grateful to be alive today. So, with that, I pass.